Well, welcome to another episode of Correcting Conversations, stories of hope and resilience inside of America's justice system. This is a podcast dedicated to supporting individuals on their journey through the justice system. I'm your host, Stan Frankart, and I'm excited about today's episode. We have a phenomenal conversation ahead. But as we dive into this episode, I wanted to remind everybody that in each episode, we're going to be exploring the challenges and triumphs of the justice system, of the corrections field, as well as reentry, and trying to offer insights and resources, as well as inspiring stories from those who have walked this path. So, if you wouldn't mind, join me in welcoming our guest, the honorable, phenomenal, the gifted and talented Honorable Judge Lachelle Stroud from Franklin County Common Pleas, Domestic Relations and Juvenile Division Court. Judge Stroud, great to see you today. How are you?
Good to see you as well. All is well. All is well. How
Good.
are you doing?
Things are going well in my world. I feel like corrections is always an ebb and flow kind of field. And working in the reentry space, this is the time of year where it's a hills and valleys journey, right? The
Mm,
weather's
yeah.
breaking. Folks, are starting to get out a little bit, and that comes with its own nuances, but we're navigating it. So,
Yes, yes. Same. All of that here and more.
yes, ma'am. I can imagine. I can imagine. Well, thank you for joining us today. I'm glad to have you. I think our listeners, our viewers, as well as our ACA family, I think we're in for a great treat today. So, Judge Stroud, thank you for taking some time out to join us.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invitation and look forward to it. I consider ACA home. I went to my first ACA conference earlier this year and really felt at home, enjoyed my time with ACA. So now I'm a part of the family. Looking forward to returning in August.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I will probably see you down in good old Denver, Colorado. I'll be joining the family affairs as well
Uh,
down there. I always feel like American Correctional Association conferences are like good old family barbecues, right? You see folks you ain't
mhm,
seen in a while. You get to have good conversations, talk about what's been going on in different, jurisdictions.
mhm,
And so I love American Correctional Association's conferences and just the innovation, the data drivenness behind their
mhm.
work. And so I'm excited about that conference. So I'm looking forward to seeing you down there.
Yes, I am as well. I'm so grateful that you all expanded under the leadership of the immediate past president, Denise Robinson, to include the Juvenile Summit. So that's how I was able to join in January in Orlando and excited to do that again. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Well, speaking of juvenile, I got some questions about how you're navigating this space. But before I dive into some of those questions, as you know, being a judge, as being a litigator, as being somebody who's been entrenched in this field, I'm curious to know what inspired you to pursue a career in law and specifically juvenile justice.
So I have always been interested in the law. Since I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a lawyer. It was the absolute only thing that I ever wanted to do. And not that I understood exactly like the role of a lawyer at five, but I had a strong sense of justice and fairness, making sure that everyone, no matter what they look like, where they came from, how much money they had, that they had someone who was willing and able to speak up for them in an effective and informed way. And so, what I did not understand at the time that both of my grandmothers, both my maternal and paternal grandmothers, had dreams of being a lawyer, and both for different yet similar reasons, believed that it was not possible for them. So, I believe that they really did plant that seed. And now I have the ability to live out both of their dreams and go beyond even what they dreamed and prayed for. And so growing up, I was always the classroom lawyer, like the person who would know the rules at school, the policies, the student handbook, so that I could speak up for my peers as well as myself. And so it always came naturally. Advocacy came naturally. And both of my parents were in service industries. My mother owned a hair salon for the overwhelming majority of my childhood, and my father served as a paramedic with our local fire department here in Columbus. And they both also volunteered in the community, whether it was in our church or tutoring young children. And so that taught me at a very young age. Even, in fifth grade, you can tutor kindergartners. You always have something to give. And so service has always come naturally for me. Helping those who are less fortunate than you has always come naturally to me, as well as advocacy. And so as I got older, I still didn't even know in law school which area that I wanted to go into. But I knew that I enjoyed working with youth. And what really attracted me to juvenile was the rehabilitation aspect of it, because the focus was so much on that we have an opportunity to assist youth. They have an opportunity to work in tandem with the system and say we have a second chance. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And because we're a court of equity, meaning we get to do what's fair. We have laws that govern our area, but at the end of the day, as a judge, I get to make decisions that I believe are fair and equitable to those who we serve. So my very first role, very first internship, the summer after my first year of law school, was here in this court. So
Wow.
I worked for a judge. I was her intern that summer in domestic relations and juvenile court, and that sealed it for me that this was the area that I wanted to be in after serving with her, as well as that I wanted to be a judge. And so, yes, I did not find my way initially here after becoming licensed. So I actually volunteered in our court because we have volunteer opportunities. So I did that even after I was licensed to practice and had a full-time job in a different area, until I found my way to our court in a full-time role. So yes, that's just a snippet of what pulled me, but I'm sure we'll get deeper into my story. But that's what attracted me to juvenile law: the ability for us to do what's fair as we do what is right and serve justice equally for all, and the rehabilitation aspect and opportunities that we have specifically in juvenile court.
That's super powerful, Judge Stroud. And thank you for sharing that. It sounds like it was in your genes to be where you are today.
Mhm.
And it sounds like divinely you were able to break through some barriers that maybe held some of your ancestors
Yes.
back. Right,
Hmm.
to being able to walk out their legacy in your
Yes.
current vocation and role. So, what an honorable feat, and what a beautiful picture of how passing the baton in our communities, planting those seeds, if you
Hmm.
will, as you have mentioned, can blossom into this beautiful, holistic, and robust opportunity for individuals to kind of carry on that flame
Hmm.
and that passion. It sounds like very early you were entrenched with the concepts and the thoughts of advocacy and serving others, and so you're doing it really well, and you're
Yes.
making tremendous strides. So salutes to you for that. That's a powerful. That's powerful.
Thank you. And it was also clear to me that it would come with obstacles, right? That the path would not be
Mm,
easy, but yet that it was still the path that I was to be on nonetheless. And so it was apparent to me, like I would always share my dream. Like when teachers in school would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was the only person who would say, that I wanted to be a lawyer. And there were some people who said that I couldn't, wouldn't, or
mm,
shouldn't. And so I heard that my entire life. And it was apparent to me that according to the statistics, that I should not be a lawyer, because the statistics, based on where I grew up and what I look like, the statistics said that I was more likely to need a lawyer than to actually be a lawyer, and more likely to have to stand before a judge than to actually be a judge. So I don't take it for granted that I sit in this role and bring all of those lived experiences with me. Um,
mhm.
and so, yes, I am eternally grateful, and understand what it means, which is why I go out and speak and share with youth so that they know about the law, know that it's possible for them in spite of the statistics, and just share in a way that's meaningful for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely know that. And speaking of overcoming obstacles, I think it would only be pertinent that, in celebration of National Cancer Survivor Month, you are a thriving, and I mean more than surviving, breast cancer warrior. And so I wanted to take a minute just to give you kudos for that. I think sometimes that, as you're working in this field, it's easy to overlook that, hey, we have our own life obstacles,
Hmm.
right? As
Yes.
you're sitting, behind the bench in the robe, and got the, got the galvin in your hand, and people are seeing this intimidated, right? it's
Uh-huh.
it's it's easy to look at that and forget that you're a human that has your own life struggles and battles that you're conquering and overcoming, as you're
Hmm.
litigating, as you're judiciously
Yes.
carrying out the law in an equitable and equal fashion and format. And
Hmm.
so I just wanted to take a moment to give you kudos for that, to celebrate, and
Thank
and to
you.
ask, like, how was that journey as a judge navigating that, and in your career, how did you continue forward, facing
Mhm.
that obstacle?
So thank you very much. It has been 11 years for me since I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I actually had just come to the court. I started working. So before I was elected as judge, I served in this same court as a juvenile magistrate, and then was subsequently promoted and appointed to the role of lead juvenile magistrate, to where I oversaw that entire department. So I came to the court as a magistrate in December of 2023. I was pregnant with our second son. I have two sons now, 11 and 15 years old, which I bring that to the bench with me every single day. But I was diagnosed in March of 2014, when I was about 8 months pregnant with my second son. And I had had a very normal, boring, as my doctor would say, pregnancy up until that point. So I'm coming to the bench every single day as a juvenile magistrate, handling delinquency and abuse, neglect dependency cases. And even the weight of that appointment was apparent to me, because I was the first magistrate that they had had in 15 years, first new magistrate they had in 15 years. So it had been the same group of people. So at the time, I was the youngest magistrate. They had traditionally appointed people who were either former prosecutors or from the public defender's office. But I came from private practice. I started my own private practice firm so that I could represent youth and parents in juvenile court specifically. Stepped out on my own and had my own practice, and it gained great success in a short period of time, to where one of the judges asked me to apply to be magistrate. So I'm just building the framework for where I was. And at that point, I had dreamed of being a judicial officer. So it seemed like everything was coming together. I had been practicing law for 10 years. Stepped away from practice, was going to make less money, but it was really about my passion. I grew up in the zip code that is still one of the top zip codes in our court, that comes before our
Mm.
court, in domestic and juvenile court. And so I felt the weight of all of that, right? Bringing my lived experiences, a different perspective to the bench. And then after I had been serving in that role for about 3.5 months, just a month away from having our second son, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so it caught me by complete surprise, and came out of nowhere. But I wanted to be able to carry out my role. And so I was still coming, serving, handling my docket every single day as I was going through tests for them to figure out, like, the stage and what the treatment plan would be. And everything was different because I was pregnant, because they didn't know if they could administer certain types of tests and if it would have an impact on our son. And so I finally got a treatment plan that I needed to have surgery before I delivered. And I already knew that I would need to be away from work for the delivery. And so it was difficult for me to share, not for my supervisor, He was
Mhm.
very empathetic and said whatever I
Mm.
needed. But for me, because I took it so seriously and wanted to be here and to serve in excellence. And
Mm.
so they recommended surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. So I had the surgery before I had my son. And I started chemotherapy when he was 4 weeks old. So I had a 4 year old and a 4 week old baby. Started chemotherapy, and I did chemotherapy for 13 months because it was stage one, but aggressive. And
Mm.
then in the middle of chemotherapy, I had to have radiation to where I went every single day for 32 days. But by the grace of God, I was able to do my chemo appointments on Friday afternoon, and I would be at work on Monday
Mm.
morning. So I did not miss a day of
Yeah.
work throughout my treatments. And when I did radiation, I went to Grant Hospital, which is right here in downtown Columbus, and I was their first appointment in the morning, and then I would come right into work. And no one knew outside of my supervisor in the beginning, because again, the role was new and the people were really just getting to know
Mhm.
me. And so I did not want to add that because that was not who I was. It was what I was going through. And I still wanted to be able to serve in excellence. So, by the grace of God, I was able to do that and make it through that entire journey without missing any work and still being able to serve everyone who came into our courtroom. And now my son just turned 11 2 months ago.
Wow.
And yes, I am 11-year survivor.
Come on, let's go. That's so encouraging and so exciting to hear. I'm talking like a story of resilience if I've ever heard one, number one, and just the level of passion and dedication that exuberates from you now, right? When I first got the privilege of
Mhm.
connecting with you and meeting you at the American Correctional Association summer conference, winter
Mhm.
conference in
Yes.
Orlando, I was just thinking about how like you exuberate this dedication and passion for the work you do, but then to hear the backstory and know like the obstacles and the things that you've overcame and that you've conquered, right? Like I'm talking more than conqueror kind of
Mhm.
language,
More
right?
than a
Of
conqueror.
of being able to do it. Come on. And walking in that, while continuing to carry out the role and vocation of such a prestigious opportunity. I mean, man, it just speaks again to the resiliency, the fortitude, and really your tenacity to pursue the call that you have to this work. So thank you so much for sharing with us and being open and honest about that journey. I know folks, especially in this work, sometimes have to, you know, put those things behind closed doors, and sometimes
Mhm.
it's easy to from somebody on the outside looking in to think that, well, they don't have no issues, they don't go
Mhm.
through things, they haven't
Yeah.
experienced what I've experienced. And here you are talking about how, you went through, a journey, and I'm
Mhm.
talking a journey, right,
Mhm.
of
Yes.
walking into a role that had never been before, right, had been immersed and
Yes.
created, that you were, the first kind of
Mhm.
person to step into, and then walking through that as you're navigating, the birth of a child, right? Like that's a
Mhm.
experience in and of
Yes.
itself, right? And then, simultaneously a diagnosis that, you've been 11 years free from now, and
Mhm.
and
Uh-huh.
being able to walk in that, and to see you continue to progress in this field, I think speaks monumental volumes to the level of resiliency that people in this field, corrections, the justice system, that they show forth every day. And so I appreciate you sharing that inspirational story of how folks can overcome and be more than conquerors. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I celebrate alongside, all of the other survivors for this month as well. And I believe that that helps us to be more informed and
Mhm.
how we serve others, right? Because everyone, one of my grandmothers used to always say, right, like be careful how you treat people because you never know. Like all of us is either going into a storm, in the middle of a storm, or coming out of. So you never know
Mhm.
what people are going through. I remember even being a magistrate, and one of the youth who was on my docket would sit in the back of the courtroom and she would sketch in her notepad. And so, just in between cases, one day when she came down, I asked her if I could see one of her sketches, and she shared with me that she herself was going through chemotherapy, and it was therapeutic for her to draw. And she asked me if I had a picture. I showed her a picture of my family. And unbeknownst to me, she sketched a picture of my husband and I and our two sons. My youngest was a baby at that time, and I still have it in my chambers. So that was
Wow.
therapeutic for her. It was absolutely a blessing for me. And she wanted to share that with me because of how she had been impacted just being in my courtroom. So you never know what people are going through, but it absolutely helps us as we serve others. Just be mindful, right?
Mm.
That people are
Yeah.
going through all types of things. While those of us who serve in corrections, this is a very traumatic point in their lives. And we know that, but sometimes in doing the work, while we ourselves want to be humanized, we have to remember to humanize those who we are serving, based on, not only the trauma that they're currently experiencing in their interaction with us, but they too have real life situations that are going on, that they're being impacted by as well.
That's so powerful. And I'm glad you bring that up because I think about, some of the common challenges and that folks are navigating who are going through the justice system, who are going possibly through corrections and on their way to reentry and things like that. And some of the challenges that I noticed, just from my own personal experiences, like the lack of understanding to basic legal rights and court procedures,
Yes.
right? Like that
Hmm.
in and of itself is a challenge that folks who
Yes,
are
that is
navigating the
foreign
courts are faced. Yeah,
to other
exactly.
people, right? Like this is what we do, and so we enjoy it, right? Hopefully, we enjoy what we're doing, and so whether it's like coming into the courthouse or coming to meet you, in that meeting space, this is foreign to them. It's not,
Absolutely.
what they've been trained in, or more likely than not, it's not where they saw themselves
Right.
being impacted, them or their family members. So yes, absolutely, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you touched on like the psychological and emotional impact it is on those that we serve, right?
Hmm.
Navigating this experience, but simultaneously on us too, right? Like we see
Yes.
some of the most hard kind of scenarios, and I'm sure on your level
Hmm.
as a juvenile judge, right? Being able
Hmm.
to see these kinds of things and the challenges that are faced by families and even for us as professionals in this space, leading with empathy, right? Like
Yes.
just being years immersed in the field. Sometimes I don't know about you, Judge Stroud, but I know for me, sometimes I can get hardened and it's just another day at the office. But being able
Uh-huh.
to lead with empathy and address those systemic inequalities, trying to
Hmm.
balance rehabilitation with accountability. Like from your perspective, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've seen young offenders or defendants facing in your juvenile court?
Hmm. It's all of those things and more, right? It's
Mm,
them normalizing things that are abnormal,
mm,
them not having control, right? It's different when you deal with youth, because oftentimes they don't have control over their circumstances. When I say circumstance, I'm
mhm,
not saying they don't have control over their decisions that they make and their own
mhm,
actions and behaviors. They do, but they have no control over where they live, who their parents are, whether they have food to eat, clean clothes to wear, the school that they go to. So it's all of those things, that I think sometimes fuels a sense of hopelessness and desperation.
mm,
Sometimes it's a lack of exposure, not having anyone to have had discussions with them about their own mental health, about their emotions, about how to regulate their emotions, so that they can have a sense of emotional maturity. Sometimes it's being limited, based on the community that they're in, thinking that the things again that they're doing are normal, that this is the
mhm,
way it should be. So I think sometimes a challenge is that lack of exposure and the fact that they really don't have a strong sense of control over many of the things that they are experiencing. And so, in serving the whole child, right, we all want reduced recidivism rates, and we all want rehabilitation in youth. But for myself personally, as the lead juvenile judge, I had to take a step back and say, we want these things, but what are we doing to provide resources, support to assist, right? Because at the end of the day, they're a child. Now they've come in contact with us, which is traumatic. So, what are we giving them to assist them so that they don't return to us? What are we
Mm,
providing to contribute to that rehabilitation, or really habilitation, to focus on the whole child? So it can be very challenging work. And I'm a type of person, I want all the things at the same time because I believe we are resource rich. Franklin County is the largest county in the state. We are resource rich. We should be innovative. We should be trend setting, based on simply
mm,
because of where we're geographically situated and what we have available to us. But sometimes I have to take a step back so that we don't become overwhelmed by doing all of the things. But I still believe that there's a lot that we can do so that we can target some of those challenges to empower the entire family. That's an opportunity we get in juvenile justice. We get to empower the whole family because I also don't want to dump pour into all of these things into the youth, but then they have to go right back home. So a part of
mhm.
my focus is how can we better serve the parents so that
Right.
the parents, if they want assistance and support, to change housing, to be able to change communities, to help give them workforce readiness information so that the child can really be in a better environment within their same family structure. So serving the entire family can be a challenge as well. But I think
That's
we have
super
to do it.
powerful.
It's a part of juvenile justice. That was a lot.
Absolutely,
I know,
absolutely. I appreciate you. No, that was that. I pulled so many nuggets out of what you shared. Just dealing with the holistic person, right? Like really
right?
looking at not just the person who's before you in juvenile court, right, or that
Hmm.
young
Hmm.
individual who is navigating their own life circumstances, but looking at the environment that
Yes.
they're in, right, and understanding
Hmm.
that that plays a factor, looking
Yes.
at that individual has been unfortunately desensitized sometimes by
Hmm.
things that now are we see as abnormal. They have normalized that. That's a
Yes.
nugget to
Hmm.
understand that, like, the things that we count as normal
Hmm.
and abnormal are being skewed in the
Yes.
juvenile or the youth of
Hmm.
today. And so
Hmm.
that's a nugget to hold on to as a professional in this field, to really help hold that balance of habilitation, as you pointed out, because it's hard to rehabilitate something that
Hmm.
hasn't never been
Yes.
habilitated, but then simultaneously making sure that the family has the resources in place. And speaking of families, I was thinking about, I think about my mother. I was that young juvenile offender who was going through the revolving door, and I
Uh-huh.
remember a conversation with my mother after I had committed the crime that bonded me over to the adult system. And my mother just looked at me and said, "Stan, I gave it everything I had." And so I'm thinking about some of the listeners and possibly viewers who are probably in that place with their
Hmm.
daughter or son,
Yes.
and they're like, but Judge Stroud, you don't know, I've given everything that I've had. And
Hmm.
so from your standpoint, Your Honor, I would like to know, like, how can families support a loved young individual who is going through the justice system?
Hmm. I was sitting in that, in what your mother said to you. I gave it all I had. And I honestly believe that is most parents,
Hmm.
um, because no one really equips us, right, to be parents. And we're really all just trying to figure it out,
Hmm.
as best we can with the resources and information and knowledge that we have, giving it all that we have, right? Which is why, again, we have to serve the entire family, because I think most parents are some exhausted, And then that same sense of hopelessness and desperation that the youth are feeling, are that is felt by many of the parents as well. And so
Mhm.
it's arming the parents because some of them never saw themselves here, and it comes with a sense
Mhm.
of shame, I would imagine,
Mhm.
as well on the parents' end. So it took me back, because last fall there was a parent. She thought it was me. Really, her child was before a magistrate, but the magistrate would not hold her son in the
Mhm.
detention center. And so the mom went to the news to basically tell on the court that we were not locking her son up. And so one of the reporters reached out to me and wanted me, to respond. And initially I said no. I was not interested
Mhm.
in having the conversation. And then they had a more seasoned reporter reach out to me, and out of respect for her, I had a conversation with her first. What I don't think that parents realize when they are giving it all that they have, I think parents don't realize the long lasting impact of the detention center on their child,
Mhm.
and realize that how traumatic it is for someone whose brain is not fully developed, and someone who should not be there. Now, are there people who should be detained? Absolutely. If they are a threat to public safety, they absolutely should be in our juvenile, we call it intervention center now instead of detention center. They should be there. But for the majority of youth in our community, they do not belong in the detention center. And we know, right? Those of us in corrections know that scared straight does not work. And that, especially for youth, we can do more harm than good. And so
Mhm.
I ended up doing the story, but through that lens from a reporter who understood,
Mhm.
my perspective and wanted to have the conversation for parents. I think it's for us, again, sharing. A part of our role is not just to do our duties, and responsibilities, but also to educate and inform our communities. And so it was sharing through that platform, as well as the work that we do in the community, that we do not want to lock up all youth, and that
Mhm.
we can do them more harm than good simply by them being in the detention center if that's not where they should be. And that they will
Mhm.
really come back home worse than they were before they went if it's not the appropriate placement for them. I think we have to, for parents who are giving it all that they have and doing the absolute best that they can, make sure that they know that there are other things. We have criminal messenger programming. We have other youth community partners. Because I thought about myself with my two sons. If I felt like that, my husband, my father, people in our family or close family friends, if I cannot call on them if we had a need for our sons, I could think about so many other community partners who are doing the work that I would call.
Mhm.
At least 10
Yeah.
people came to mind that I could think of well before the detention center. So
Mhm.
it changed my mindset, and then birthed a focus group that we had last year, a summit for the first time. One, so that we can hear from the parents who said just what your mother said. I gave it
Yeah.
all I have. Because when people are there, we have more to give. That's a part of
Mhm.
our roles and why we do this, right? We
Mhm.
know about community programming and organizations, and you know about so many things about the work that you do in reentry to say
Mhm.
that's not where you want your child to go. So we had a summit for two reasons. One, to hear from the youth and from the parents, many of them with those same stories,
Mhm.
but to know how are you experiencing our justice system? Because that's important
Mhm.
to inform us and how we move
Yeah.
forward. And then secondly, an aspect of that is we had a resource fair to where we could bring together people in the community, who had these organizations that were serving the community, so that the parents and the youth could walk around and experience,
Mhm.
those who are serving in the community, and then get matched up and have referrals to be able to serve them while their children were in the community. I think that is a part of what we have to do because we know about these things, and we can then be an extension for those parents who are giving it all that they have, to say, hey, let me share with you that there's more, and that you really do have options, before you get to the place where you just feel like all you can do is put your hands up. Because I've been in the courtroom many of times, sitting in this seat as a magistrate and a judge, where a parent says just that, and then says my child cannot come back home to me.
Mm.
So imagine how that child feels to sit next to your parent in a room full of strangers, and your parents say, therefore, he or she cannot come home with me.
Yeah.
So I think that's a part, right? We have to do, it's a both and, carry out our roles that are in our job descriptions, as well as seeing the impact that we have on communities and families, so that we can be an extension in our service to the families in excellence.
That's so powerful and so full of practical next steps for that parent who may be
Yes.
listening and, saying, I've given it all I've got.
Hmm.
It's educating, that parent, educating themselves about what are the resources in the community that maybe I haven't seen, maybe I
Yes.
haven't reached out to. It's being able to seek that support from professionals like yourself and from various courts that say, okay, what else is there? What else
Hmm.
can I do? And then being able, what I heard you say, and my mother was that mother who said that, he just can't come home with me. But being
Hmm.
able to be that mom or that dad or that person, that guardian saying, okay, I'm going to advocate for my loved one. I'm going to
Yes.
advocate for this young person and say, what other rehabilitative programs are
Hmm.
available? Maybe
Yes.
it's a diversion program, right?
Hmm.
Maybe it's an intervention, a credible messenger program. So hearing you say those things, I'm just thinking as that parent who may be out there, these are practical nuggets that if
Yes.
I was a note-taking person, I'd be writing these down, right? Because this is treasures of wisdom. And then I think too, like you shared a lot about, for an individual who finds themselves justice involved, about the importance of staying engaged, right?
Hmm.
Like not just checking out saying like, well, man, my mom or my dad or my guardian wrote me off, but staying engaged, saying, okay, I know I've made some mistakes. I've made some
Hmm.
bad choices, but I'm in front of somebody who believes the power of redemption in me.
Yes.
How do I stay engaged? How do I follow up? What can I do to embrace this current moment that I'm in? How do I communicate effectively, right? Being able to say, these are my needs. This is where I'm struggling. This is
Yes.
where the gap may be. And then taking advantage of those credible messenger programs,
Hmm.
taking advantage of, the various opportunities that may be set before an individual who's navigating this journey. I know for me, as that juvenile sitting in the courtroom, that exposure piece, right, was a critical thing that changed the trajectory of my life. I got exposed to things,
Hmm.
education being one of them, right?
Yes.
Reintegration and understanding that there's a process to an individual who's re-entering from the juvenile and adult justice
Hmm.
system. Those things were things I didn't think about before, right? And so
Yes.
being able to have that credible messenger program like Franklin County does down in
Hmm.
Columbus, Ohio, to say, hey, this is an opportunity for you to learn from somebody
Uh-huh.
who has firsthand experience with what you're going through. And being able to, validate that and affirm those kinds of programs, I think adds that much more support. So I
Yes.
appreciate you, Judge Strauss,
Yes.
sharing that, because I'm thinking for that parent, I'm like, man, these are nuggets, and and
Uh-huh.
and so excited because I'm like, maybe for the first time, that parent who felt hopeless
Hmm.
now has some hope.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you sharing that perspective of how, as a professional, the focus is remaining on rehabilitation or habilitation for the first
Hmm.
time for some individuals, and that second chance piece. So for the justice professional out there listening, the
Hmm.
judge out there listening, the prosecutor out there, you're like, I'm thinking in my mind, oh, there is hope. There is
There is hope.
rehabilitation. There is second chances that are
Hmm.
available. And then
Hmm.
being able to, have some of the innovative ideas that you talked about, right? That encourage kind of that systemic improvement of saying, no, it is partially our responsibility to educate the public on what
Hmm.
is out there, on different resources that are available, on how a parent can navigate the juvenile justice system to support that loved one. So I'm like, man, you just unpack so much wisdom. I'm like, I am taking notes if I'm being honest, because I'm like, man, these are tools in a tool belt right here. So I appreciate that. I have a few more questions, and I want to
Okay.
dive into them. I think that they'd be super helpful to get a little bit of perspective. I'm familiar with the docket that you had called an empowerment docket,
Okay.
and I don't know if you were ready for this conversation, but
Okay.
I was researching and I was thinking about diversion programs, and I thought about an empowerment docket, and for the justice and the other professionals in the field. um could you explain what the empowerment docket is, and talk a little bit about how it came to be, and the history behind what birthed that empowerment docket?
Yes, I will. I'll blend it in. I wanted to go back. There was something that you just said, two things that I want to touch on, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
And one is in
absolutely.
line with empowering. Um, so the one thing in sharing and educating the public, one of the ways that we get to do that in our field is when we do interviews with the media, and you never know who's listening. And so, from one of those interviews, when I was talking about, I think the interviewer asked me if I had hope,
Mm,
because that particular interview highlighted some of the despairing statistics around some of the things that we do in juvenile court. And I share with her the importance of engaging with community organizations who are already doing the work well, and that I absolutely have hope. Because if we don't have hope, like
mm,
I shouldn't be here if I don't have hope, right? Um, and so, but you never know who's listening, because I had an adult inmate in a prison facility in Cleveland, Ohio, who then reached out to me to offer assistance to us. And he shared with me, I ended up setting up a Zoom that his case manager arranged. And we set up a Zoom meeting, and he shared with me how he, had started in juvenile court and was also bound over, and wanted to, through his lens and perspective, provide assistance and support, because he heard my heart in the
mm,
interview that he saw. And so now we are working with not only him, but some other adult inmates in that facility in Cleveland. And a team of our staff has shared part of a new curriculum that we're doing. And the inmates are reviewing that curriculum, giving feedback, giving us other ways to look at it to help us as we're serving the youth through their unique perspective. So I highlight that to say you never know who's listening. And again, we all have something to give. Wherever we all have something to give that the rest of us are able to benefit from. So it's being willing to listen and to learn, no matter where anyone is currently in their circumstances, in their situation. So just being open. It reminded me of that when you were saying something before you asked this question. And then I am going to the second thing that I thought of, weave it into empowerment, because it really is about empowering. I do believe that's a part of our role, as we're serving, to empower those who we are serving. What I've found is many people, us included, many people do not know how to ask for help, and they need
mm,
an assistance and to be empowered, so that they can use their vocabulary and language to know that it's not a weakness to ask for help, and to be empowered to ask for exactly it is what you need, right?
mm,
So it takes a certain level of strength to admit that you need help, but then also it takes empowerment to say not only can you ask for help, but you can ask for specifically what you need, and knowing
mm,
that you can trust that the other person on the other side is going to listen to you and give you what you need, not what they think you need. And so that's a
mm,
piece that we've added to our programming, both with the youth and with the parents that we're serving, to do more, have more like that summit and focus groups, to ask the people who we are serving, How are you experiencing us and the service that we're providing? And how can we better serve you? So, what do you need help with specifically? And share that with us. And so, one of the programs that we started is a mental health program called Inner Words with Dr. Lede, because we also found that many of the youth were not aware of mental health education. And so, as a form of empowering them to be able to better share their needs, we had to start with first sharing this mental health education, giving them the language, helping them to learn more about how to regulate their emotions. But then we also need to give that to the parents, because some of the youth said, okay, now I'm getting this information, but I'm triggering my parent. So my parents also need the same information that you're providing to me. That's what I thought of when you were speaking. The actual empowerment docket is one of our specialty dockets. So we, like many other courts around the country, have specialty dockets, which traditionally centered around substance abuse and recovery. So we have a family recovery court for parents whose children have been removed because of their substance abuse issues. And then we have a youth recovery court. And then we have the empowerment docket. That was started shortly after I came to the court as a magistrate. The empowerment docket is for youth who are the victims of human trafficking
Mhm.
here in our court, to where their victimization in human trafficking led them to the offense that they've been charged with and have pending in our court. I did not know much about the safe harbor laws that were enacted at that time. But what I did know is that one of the magistrates who was instrumental in my training was serving as the magistrate in that docket. And every single time he had that docket, he was at court well after 5, well after all of the other magistrates had left. And so I went to him and said, how can I help you? And then you can get out of here earlier, and I can take on some of that to be able to assist and serve. And that's how I was introduced to the empowerment docket, was just I wanted to help a colleague who had helped me. What I didn't know that I found the first time I walked into that courtroom was that most of the youth on that docket looked like me. I thought that human trafficking was similar to the movie Taken and so many other movies and TV shows that I saw. But because one of the top zip codes is a zip code that I grew up in, I should not have been surprised as I was when I walked in to the courtroom and saw myself. And so I immersed myself in human trafficking to make sure that I was knowledgeable coming into that docket. And so now the docket has been in existence. We do it as a dedicated docket. It's been in existence for almost 10 years now. And Magistrate Larry Sanchez, who I stepped in to help, and I have traveled around to national human trafficking conferences. And we're actually speaking, our Ohio Attorney General is having a human trafficking summit this summer, where Magistrate Sanchez and I will speak and share about our experiences, what we've learned, the red flags of human trafficking. We go into schools and do that as well as how the youth and the families have experienced that docket. Because also what I did not know and we learned is that most human traffickers for youth human trafficking are family members or paramours who have groomed. The youth think that it's a boyfriend or girlfriend, but they've actually been groomed by the person. So it's just providing more education because I believe a lot of people don't realize Franklin County, Columbus, Ohio. Is not unique in that regard. There's many of us throughout our jurisdictions who have youth who are the victims of human trafficking. So yes, it's been very enlightening, but that's our empowerment docket and how it came about.
Well, thank you so much for sharing so transparently that docket, and what a powerful reminder how justice really is an opportunity for change. Like
Mhm.
throughout this entire conversation, as we're closing up, I just think about all of the conversation kind of mounted and pointed towards how you see your role as an opportunity for change in the very communities that you serve. And I think for me, that's encouraging. It gives me hope. It shows forth the resilience and innovation that's possible for professionals like ourselves working in this field, for people in the communities who might find themselves on the receiving end of services that we provide from this
Hmm.
field. I'm just so encouraged and have this hopeful optimism having this conversation with you. And so thank you so much, Judge Stroud, for being willing
Absolutely.
to have this conversation. This has been a tremendous gift. I think our listeners, as I said early on in the introduction, were in for a treat. I think they got the full course of a meal with the dessert to go with it. I mean, just really, really, really a powerful conversation. So, in closing, what would be a final message you would like to leave for our listeners?
A final message, right? We've talked about so much. Thank you. I would be remiss if I did not thank you for the invitation. Just, to listen, to hear, and as well as to continue to be a part, of the ACA family. I appreciate the opportunity to be here on this platform and don't take it for granted at all. Um, I think as a reminder for all of us, right? First, to take care of ourselves. Um,
Mhm.
in this service oriented field, I believe we are here to serve others, and sometimes in service we can continue to push ourselves back further and further. So one, to encourage those of us who are doing this work to serve ourselves first before we do the work, because it can become depleting, which is how we see so much burnout. So to figure out the things that you need and to serve yourself first, that our own personal mental health and emotional wellness is a critical part of the work that we do. So making sure that whether we need to get it or to provide it, because that's something that we're doing here now. We've just started what I have coined as an emotional wellness collective, which is primarily for our staff. And I shared that with the staff. This is for you because we as a court care about your mental and emotional well-being. So I would want that for the listeners. And hopefully, if other courts and parts of the ACA and corrections have not done that, to explore it for those of us who are serving, so we can take care of ourselves first to ensure that we are well before we serve. Because my commitment to myself is to pour from my overflow and no longer pour until I have an empty cup. So for everyone to take care of yourself first, which is a major shift in a lot of people's philosophy. And then to remember to keep the hope and the burning flame that we have, right? Because if we don't have hope, if we start to believe that there is this, um, that everything is bleak, if we accept that as the truth, now, are there some things that are not going well? Absolutely. Will we have difficult days? Absolutely. It is a part of the work. But we have to step back and see the bigger picture, so that we keep hope and that we continue to try, right? So if you think of something, just try it and see. See if it works. See if someone else contributes something to it that helps it to be successful. But don't lose hope and continue to try in spite of what it is that we go through. And then probably lastly would be the empowering those who we serve, so that they too are empowered to communicate that they need help, to ask for what it is that they need, but to know that they too have hope and that we're here to assist and to serve them. That was a lot to
So
wrap up, but I thought of so
good.
many different things throughout this conversation.
That was so good, and I appreciate so much the wisdom. I think the nuggets that I'm taking away from this give me that lingering hope to know that it is possible. As you have said many times, that you gotta have hope,
Hmm.
especially in this field, because we're working and serving in the lives of people, and people are redeemable. People
Yes.
are able to overcome. People are resilient, and people are worth that investment. So thank you
Yes.
so much for sharing that and being willing to walk us through that process. And again, Judge Stroud, thank you so much for the wonderful wisdom that you've shared. This has been a tremendous gift for me. I know for our American Correctional Associations family who sponsors and supports this podcast. But also, I know for many, many people who are being impacted in various ways by the justice system. So thank you so much, Judge Stroud, for your time, for your consideration through this. For our listeners, as we wrap up this episode, I would be amiss if I didn't share at least some practical ways to stay connected and have some resources. As always, subscribe, like, share, and follow the podcast. If you're not a member of the ACA membership, please get you an ACA membership. This is a great way for you to stay connected, stay engaged, stay informed, but also for those in the communities. One of the gifts that Judge Stroud gave us was just ask, being able to advocate and ask those in your sphere of influence, sphere of impact, to
Mhm.
what are the resources? How can I get educated? Who is out there? What have I not been privy to that I need to try? So, Judge Stroud, thank you for that tidbit of information. And as always, let's continue to walk this journey of hope and resilience. Thank you so much. And Judge Stroud, thank you as well for your
Thank
time.
you.